Welcome back to the channel. Folks, if you're a fan of the Raiders or just someone who enjoys some good old football drama, and let's be real, who doesn't? You're in for a treat today. We've got a juicy topic to discuss. And it's a big one. The real problem with the Las Vegas Raiders isn't their head coach or quarterback, it's their owner, Mark Davis. And if you think I'm just here to throw shade, hold on tight because this video's about to get real. And trust me, it's going to be more entertaining than watching the Raiders try to hold onto a lead in the fourth quarter. Before we dive into the thick of it, though, I need you to do me a solid. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with your fellow Raider Nation members, or anyone you think could use a little more football drama in their lives. Now, let's get into it. Mark Davis, the man who inherited the Raiders from his legendary father, Al Davis, has been at the helm for over a decade. And let me tell you, it's been a wild ride. But here's the thing. As much as Mark wants to honor his dad's legacy and continue the so-called Raider way, it's not working. And here's why. It's because Mark Davis doesn't seem to know who he is as an owner. Instead of crafting his own identity, he's stuck in an endless cycle of trying to replicate Al Davis's glory days, a strategy that's led the franchise into the quicksand of mediocrity. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, honoring the past isn't a bad thing, right? Well, sure, but you can't live in the past. Especially when you're in the NFL. The game has evolved, and so must the people who run the teams. And that's where Mark Davis is seriously falling short. It's like trying to run a modern-day offense with a quarterback from the 70s. You're just not going to get anywhere. So buckle up, because we're about to break down the mess that has been the Mark Davis era. And trust me, it's more complicated than figuring out the Raiders' quarterback situation, and that's saying something. The eternal search for identity. Let's start with the basics. What is it that makes a team great? Is it the flashy plays, the star players, or maybe the iconic moments that you'll forever remember? Sure, those things are fun, but what truly sets the great teams apart is their identity. The teams with a clear, cohesive sense of who they are, what they stand for, and how they approach the game, they win championships. Think about the Pittsburgh Steelers or the New England Patriots. They know who they are, and they stick to it, year after year. Now let's talk about the Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders, the Oakland Raiders, the Los Angeles Raiders. They've been through more cities than most teams go through head coaches. And I mean, seriously, folks, we're not just talking about moving around a bit. The Raiders are one of the most storied franchises in NFL history, with a deep-rooted culture. But there's a major problem. Mark Davis hasn't figured out how to carry that legacy forward in a meaningful way. You see, the problem isn't necessarily that Mark Davis wants to honor Al Davis's legacy. I mean, who wouldn't want to carry on the legacy of one of the most influential figures in NFL history? But here's the thing. Al Davis was a visionary, a maverick, and his own man. He built a team that was synonymous with toughness, fearlessness, and making bold moves. But Mark? Well, Mark has struggled to step out of his father's shadow, constantly searching for a coach or player who can somehow recreate that Raider way. The result? A revolving door of head coaches and a team stuck in a constant state of rebuilding. The endless coaching carousel. Let's talk about the revolving door of head coaches under Mark Davis's ownership. I mean, seriously, if the Raiders had $1 for every head coach they've hired since 2011, they'd probably be able to buy a Super Bowl ring at this point. Since Mark Davis took over, the Raiders have gone through 5 head coaches in just over a decade. Let's take a trip down memory lane. Dennis Allen, 2012 to 2014. The man who didn't have a chance. Dennis Allen's tenure was a nightmare, with the Raiders finishing each season with a losing record. Tough gig, but ultimately, he didn't have the pieces to succeed. Jack Del Rio, 2015 to 2017. This was supposed to be the era of rebuilding. But let's be honest, Del Rio never really took the team to the next level. He had some promising moments, but those were always followed by frustrating setbacks. John Gruden, 2018 to 2021, yes. The big comeback. Gruden returned to the Raiders with a lot of hype and even more memes. But despite his pedigree and the massive contract, the results were underwhelming. Sure, the Raiders had a few decent seasons, but ultimately Gruden was let go after a slew of off-field controversies. Josh McDaniels, 2022-2023. The one with the most, what were they thinking, moments. McDaniels, fresh off a failed stint in Denver, was supposed to bring that Patriots mystique to Vegas. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. He was fired after just a season and a half. Antonio Pierce, 2023-2024. Pierce came in as a hopeful interim head coach. A former Raider himself, trying to reignite that old magic. He did what he could. But a 9-17 record, including a 4-win season in 2024, wasn't exactly what the team was hoping for. That's 5 head coaches in just over a decade. Meanwhile, other teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have had just 3 head coaches since 1969, have found consistency and success. I mean, it's not rocket science. People, if you want to build something long-term, stability is key, but in Mark Davis's case, stability is just a word in the dictionary, not a practice on the field. The curse of the quarterback position. Okay, let's talk quarterbacks for a minute. Because, let's face it, the Raiders haven't exactly been blessed with a franchise quarterback since Rich Gannon, remember him? In the years since Gannon led the team to a Super Bowl appearance in 2003. The Raiders have been stuck in a revolving door at the most important position on the field. From Jamarcus Russell, need I say more? To Derek Carr, solid but not great. The Raiders have been searching for a leader under center for years. And while there have been some promising moments from players like Carr, the franchise just hasn't found the quarterback they need to lead them to the promised land. In 2024, the Raiders made some noise in the draft, trying to get a real answer at quarterback. But here's the thing. Instead of going all in and showing that classic, Raider aggression, that we all know and love, they played it safe. And safe doesn't win championships. Folks, it's this kind of timid decision-making that highlights the bigger issue. The Raiders can't commit to a clear identity. Without that, you can't make bold moves. And without bold moves, you won't win Super Bowls. The culture crisis. Let's talk about culture for a moment. You hear a lot of teams talk about their culture. The New England Patriots have their disciplined, no-nonsense culture. The San Francisco 49ers have their hard-hitting, physical football culture. The Raiders? Well, they've been trying to resurrect a culture that hasn't existed consistently since the 90s. The problem with Mark Davis is that he's so obsessed with recreating the past that he's not allowing the team to develop a culture for the present. The Raider way was built on toughness, boldness, and being a little bit crazy, but it's hard to live up to that when the franchise is stuck in neutral. So, what's the solution? Honestly, it's pretty simple. Mark Davis needs to stop looking back and start looking forward. Instead of obsessing over his father's legacy, he needs to carve out his own identity as an owner. That means committing to a long-term plan, making the right hires, and giving them the freedom to execute that plan. It means hiring a coach and front office that can develop a culture that works for the current NFL, not one from 30 years ago. And it means finally finding a quarterback who can lead this team into the future. Conclusion. Time to move forward. At the end of the day, the biggest issue with the Raiders is not the head coach, the quarterback, or the defense. It's Mark Davis's inability to step out of his father's shadow and build a team that reflects his vision. Until that happens, the Raiders will continue to be stuck in a cycle of mediocrity, always chasing the ghost of their former glory days. So, Raider Nation, what do you think? Can Mark Davis finally figure out his identity and lead this team to greatness? Or are we doomed to another decade of frustration? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want more videos like this. I'll catch you next time.